July 1099. Dawn breaks over Jerusalem, and the final assault begins. For weeks, the Crusaders have starved outside the walls. They have survived disease, thirst, and failed attacks. Now, with rebuilt siege towers dragged across the dry ground, they make their move. The horns sound. Thousands of knights and foot soldiers rush toward the ramparts. Scaling ladders slam against stone. Arrows rain from above. Defenders pour boiling oil, throw rocks, and push the ladders back. The Crusaders keep climbing, gripping the rungs even as flames spread across the wood. On the northern side of the city, the largest siege tower rolls into position. Christian archers on the top deck fire down to cover the men below. Slowly, the tower reaches the wall. A bridge drops. Crusader knights charge across it and slam into the defenders. The fighting is immediate and brutal, sword against spear. Shields smashed against helmets. Men fall from rooftops, dragged into alleys, pushed off battlements. Noise fills the air, screams, metal clashing, and shouts in Latin and Arabic. After hours of brutal combat, a small section of the north wall begins to crack. The defenders are exhausted. Their lines are thinning. The Crusaders press harder with picks and axes. Then it happens. A section of the north gate collapses under weight and impact. Dust and stone explode outward. Crusaders pour through the breach, shouting Deus Vult, meaning God wills it. Defenders fall back into the narrow streets. The street fighting is even more violent than the assault on the walls. Every corner becomes a trap. Crusaders push forward step by step, clearing houses and rooftop positions. Fires start across the city as both sides lose control. By late afternoon, organized resistance collapses. The Crusaders control the Temple Mount and seize key gates. Leaders gather near the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and declare Jerusalem theirs. Just hours after taking the city through bloodshed, they choose a ruler and form the Kingdom of Jerusalem. But victory brings a harsh truth. This new kingdom has fewer than 10,000 European soldiers. Outside its walls stand the armies of Egypt, Damascus, Aleppo, and Mosul. Jerusalem is now a Christian island in a sea of Muslim power. The Crusader States are born, not through planning or diplomacy, but through a single, violent morning that changed the entire Middle East. The first years after 1099 are chaotic. The Crusaders control Jerusalem, but almost nothing else. Roads, ports, and farms lie in enemy territory. Supply lines are weak. The nearest reinforcements are months away across the Mediterranean. Knights and local allies spread out quickly to secure the land. Small groups ride along the coastal roads to seize castles and watchtowers. Others march north to control the trade routes into Syria. Everything is done with urgency. Without these roads, the new kingdom will starve. Within a few years, 4 Crusader states take shape. The Kingdom of Jerusalem, the strongest, centered on the Holy City. The County of Tripoli, built around the coast of modern Lebanon. The Principality of Antioch, a wealthy city-state in the north. The County of Edessa, the easternmost state, far inland, surrounded by Muslim powers. Together, these 4 states form a thin chain along the eastern coast of the Mediterranean. But even at their height, Europeans are a tiny minority here. A few thousand knights ruling over hundreds of thousands of Muslims, Jews, Armenian Christians, Greek Christians, and local tribes. To survive, the Crusaders rely on something new: professional military orders. The Knights Templar, formed in the early 1100s, patrol dangerous roads and escort travelers. They build fortresses, store supplies, and run an organized, disciplined force trained for constant war. The Hospitallers, originally a group of monks who cared for the sick, evolve into a powerful military order. They guard castles, fields, and villages across the frontier. They become expert defenders, using heavy armor and strict discipline to hold back raids. Their castles, Crac des Chevaliers, Margate, Belvoir, and others, become the backbone of Crusader defense. Towers, deep moats, thick walls, and high vantage points allow tiny garrisons to survive against much larger forces. But these defenses are tested every week. Raids strike from Damascus, Aleppo, and the Sinai. Muslim cavalry ambush Crusader patrols. Caravans disappear. Farmers flee fields near the frontier. Travelers must move in large groups or risk death. The Crusader states survive not because they outnumber their enemies, they never do, but because they move quickly and use their castles as anchors. When an enemy army appears, the Crusaders retreat into strongholds. When the enemy withdraws, they ride out again to reclaim the land. Inside the cities, life stabilizes slowly. Markets reopen. Merchants from Italy and France arrive. Eastern and Western Christian communities mix with local Jewish and Muslim populations under new rules. But beneath the surface, tension never fades. Everyone knows the truth. The Crusader states are fragile surrounded, and always one defeat away from collapse. They won Jerusalem through shock and determination, but to hold it, they need unity, discipline, and constant vigilance. Because outside the walls, powerful forces are gathering, leaders who are planning the counterattack that will decide the future of the entire region. By the early 1130s, the Muslim world is changing fast. For decades, rival cities and dynasties fought each other more than the Crusaders. But now a new leader rises who will change everything. Imad ad-Din Zengi, the Attabeg of Mosul and Aleppo. Zengi is not interested in compromises or temporary truces. He has one clear goal: unite northern Syria and push the Crusaders out of the region. Unlike previous rulers, he makes jihad a central part of his state policy, a rallying cry to bring rival Muslim factions together. He strengthens his armies, secures alliances, and expands his influence through northern Syria. By the early 1140s, he sees his opportunity. The county of Edessa, the smallest, weakest, and most isolated Crusader state. Edessa is far inland, surrounded by powerful Muslim cities and defended by a small garrison. If any Crusader state will fall first, it is this one. Now cut straight to the action. 1144. Zengi marches on Edessa with a large army. His troops surround the city, cut off the bridges, and begin pounding the walls with siege engines. Inside, panic rises. The garrison is small, and reinforcements are too far away. The defenders try desperate repairs, but Zengi's forces keep tightening the noose. After days of continuous assault, a weak section of the wall collapses. Zengi's soldiers pour through the breach. Fighting erupts in the streets. Houses are stormed. Survivors flee into churches, hoping for sanctuary. Many are cut down in the chaos. Edessa falls. It is the first Crusader state to be completely destroyed. News of the disaster spreads across the Middle East and into Europe. For the Crusaders, it is a shock unlike anything they have faced since Jerusalem. The fall of Edessa proves that their lands can be lost, and that the Muslim world is rising under strong leadership. When word reaches Europe, panic turns into action. Preachers call for a new crusade to save the Holy Land. Kings and nobles answer. The result will be the Second Crusade, launched with more hope and more resources than the first, but doomed to fail. Zengi does not live long to enjoy his victory. He is assassinated 1 year later, but his success will inspire new leaders, including the most famous one in all of Crusade's history. The fall of Edessa triggers a massive response in Europe. King Louis VII of France and King Conrad III of Germany lead armies east in what becomes the Second Crusade, the first crusade ever commanded by European kings. The expectations are high, the results are disastrous. The German army is destroyed before even reaching the Holy Land, wiped out by hunger, disease, and ambushes in Anatolia. The French army suffers the same fate, losing thousands in harsh mountain terrain and enemy attacks. When the surviving Crusaders finally reach the Middle East, they disagree on goals. Instead of attacking Edessa, which is already gone, they march on Damascus, one of the strongest Muslim cities in Syria. The siege lasts only a few days. Poor planning, rivalries, and confusion end the campaign in humiliation. The Second Crusade collapses. It changes nothing in the Middle East. But while the Crusaders fail, a new leader is rising from the Muslim world, one who will reshape the war completely. His name is Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, known in the West as Saladin. Born in Tikrit and raised in Damascus, Saladin begins as a young officer serving under Nur ad-Din, the son of Zengi. At first, he has no great reputation, but through discipline, loyalty, and talent, he rises quickly. His turning point comes in Egypt. In the 1160s, Nur ad-Din sends Saladin south to assist the Fatimid Caliphate, which is collapsing under internal conflict. Saladin stabilizes the region, defeats rival generals, and gains control of the Egyptian army. When the Fatimid regime ends, Saladin becomes vizier of Egypt, then sultan. He uses this new power carefully. He strengthens his forces, builds fortresses, and wins the trust of the Egyptian population. When Nur ad-Din dies, Saladin expands north, gradually taking control of Syria as well. By 1185, Saladin rules both Egypt and Syria, the first leader to unite these lands under one banner in generations. And he has one goal: retake Jerusalem and destroy the Crusader States. Saladin begins with pressure, not full invasion. He raids caravans that bring supplies to Jerusalem. He attacks isolated fortresses. He cuts into Crusader farmland and disrupts trade routes. His aim is not immediate conquest, but exhaustion, to strangle the kingdom's resources until its defenses weaken. Border battles erupt across Galilee, Samaria, and the Jordan Valley. Crusader patrols fight constant skirmishes but lose territory little by little. Saladin's forces grow larger every year. His reputation spreads across the Islamic world as the leader capable of revering nearly a century of Crusader rule. The stage is set for the next phase of the conflict, a clash that will end in one of the most famous battles of the medieval world, the Battle of Hattin and the fall of Jerusalem. We begin on July 4, 1187, the day the Crusader States break. The city of Tiberias is under siege by Saladin. Its walls are holding, but barely. Inside, Countess Esheva sends desperate messages to King Guy of Jerusalem. Come now, or the city will fall. Guy gathers the Crusader army at Saphuria, around 20,000 men, including the elite Templars and Hospitallers. His commanders warn him not to march. They tell him Tiberias can survive a little longer, and that the plains around Saphuria have water and defensible ground. They know Saladin is trying to lure them into the desert. But Guy decides to march east anyway. It is the worst decision of his life. By midday on July 3rd, the army has crossed into open, dry country with almost no water. Saladin's cavalry never lets them rest. Archers ride up, fire arrows, then pull back. They strike the columns constantly, forcing the Crusaders to form defensive circles rather than make forward progress. When night falls, the Crusaders camp on barren ground. There is no water, no shade, and no safety. Fires appear around them, the glow of Saladin's army tightening the ring. At dawn on July 4, the heat rises quickly. The Crusaders try to push toward the Sea of Galilee, but Saladin blocks every route. His cavalry continues firing arrows into the exhausted infantry. Horses collapse. Knights fight on foot. The sun scorches everything. Then Saladin gives a decisive order. His men begin burning the dry grass around the Crusader army. Smoke rolls in, choking the soldiers, blinding them, and adding unbearable heat. The Crusaders break formation, desperate to escape the flames. Saladin's infantry charges. The Crusader lines collapse under the pressure. The infantry cannot hold. The cavalry cannot break out. Everything falls apart. The center of the army, guarding the true cross, is overwhelmed. The relic, the most sacred object in the kingdom, is seized. Its loss sends shock through the remaining Crusaders. King Guy is encircled and captured. The Templar Grand Master is killed. Thousands of Crusaders are taken prisoner. Many others are cut down where they stand. Very few escape. By mid-afternoon, the battle is over. The entire field is covered in bodies, burning grass, broken shields, and abandoned banners. The Kingdom of Jerusalem has lost its army in a single day. With the Crusaders shattered, nothing stands between Saladin and the rest of the kingdom. Fortress after fortress surrenders. Acre, Nazareth, Caesarea, Jaffa, each falls quickly. Only one target remains: Jerusalem. After Hattin, Saladin marches south toward Jerusalem. The city's walls are undermanned and half-broken. There is no real army left to defend it. The last commander remaining is Balian of Ibelin, a noble who had not planned to fight. He had entered the city only to rescue his family, but the people begged him to lead the defense. With Saladin's permission, he was allowed to bring 50 knights, but inside Jerusalem he knights every man he can find. Merchants, farmers, even boys, anything to fill the ranks. Saladin begins the siege of Jerusalem in late September 1187. His forces bombard the walls, fill the ditches, and push siege towers forward. Balian organizes last-chance defenses, barricades, rooftop positions, and desperate counterattacks. There are fights at the North Wall, the Damascus Gate, and the Mount of Olives. After several days, the situation is hopeless. Balian negotiates directly with Saladin. Unlike the Crusader capture of Jerusalem in 1099, there is no massacre. Saladin agrees to spare the civilian population. Those who can pay ransom are freed. Those who cannot are still allowed to leave, though many are taken prisoner for debt. On October 2, 1187, the Crusader flag comes down from the Tower of David. The banner of Islam rises over Jerusalem for the first time in nearly 90 years. News explodes across Europe. Preachers call for another crusade, one larger and more powerful than any before. 3 kings answer the call: Richard the Lionheart of England, Philip II of France, Frederick Barbarossa of the Holy Roman Empire. This becomes the Third Crusade. Barbarossa never arrives. He drowns crossing a river in Anatolia. Philip reaches the Holy Land but soon returns home. Richard remains. Richard the Lionheart quickly becomes Saladin's chief opponent. He captures Acre after a long siege, then defeats Saladin at Arsa, one of the Crusaders' greatest battlefield victories. Later, he recaptures Jaffa through a mix of surprise attacks and naval power. But Jerusalem stays out of reach. Richard knows he does not have enough men to hold it, even if he takes it. Saladin knows he cannot destroy Richard's army without risking everything. After 2 years of fighting, both leaders agree to a truce in 1192. The Crusaders keep a line of coastal cities stretching from Tyre to Jaffa. Christian pilgrims are allowed to visit Jerusalem, even though the city remains under Muslim control. The Crusader States survive, battered, smaller, and dependent on the coast, but they survive. They rebuild fortresses, reopen ports, and prepare for the next round of war, knowing Saladin's successors will eventually return. By the mid-1300s, the entire Middle East changes again, not because of the Crusaders, but because of a new storm: the Mongols. They smash Baghdad in 1258, wipe out the Abbasid Caliphate, and sweep west into Syria. Cities fall one after another. Muslim rulers flee. Politics collapses. But the Mongols meet one enemy they cannot break: the Mamluks of Egypt. The Mamluks are former enslaved soldiers, trained from childhood to fight. They are disciplined, hardened, and deeply loyal to their commanders. Under Sultan Qutuz and General Baybars, they march north to confront the Mongols directly. 1260, the Battle of Ain Jalut. For the first time in history, a Mongol invasion is stopped. The Mamluks defeat them in open battle, saving Egypt, Syria, and the entire Islamic world from complete collapse. The victory turns the Mamluks into the region's dominant power. Now they focus on the Crusader States. Their leaders, especially Baybars and later Kalawan, view the remaining Crusader lands as unacceptable footholds for enemy armies. Baybars launches calculated, relentless campaigns across the coast. He destroys castles, massacres garrisons, and uses psychological warfare to break morale. Baybars also uses assassination as a tool. Several Crusader leaders die suddenly, stabbed by agents inside their own towns. He pressures city after city, forcing many to surrender without long sieges. Then comes the biggest blow since Edessa. 1268, the Siege of Antioch. Antioch, once one of the strongest Crusader principalities, is surrounded by tens of thousands of Mamluk troops. The defenders fight hard, but the city lacks manpower and supplies. Baybars crushes them. When Antioch falls, the result is catastrophic. Contemporary records say almost the entire population is killed or enslaved. The city is emptied in days. The Principality of Antioch, one of the oldest and most symbolic Crusader states, vanishes. Only a thin chain of coastal cities remains now: Acre, Tyre, Sidon, and a few scattered fortresses. The Crusaders no longer control inland territory. Their states shrink into fragile ports supported by Italian merchants and a few thousand knights. Everyone senses the end approaching. It is only a matter of time before the Mamluks strike the final blow. And in 1291, they do. This is the end. 1291. The Mamluk Sultan Al-Ashraf Khalil, son of Kalawan, marches north with one of the largest armies the region has ever seen. Estimates range from 40,000 to well over 100,000 men. Siege engines, archers, infantry, engineers, miners, all moving toward the last major Crusader stronghold, Acre. Acre is crowded and tense. It holds everything that remains of the Crusader presence in the Holy Land. Inside the walls are Templars, Hospitallers, Teutonic Knights, Italian merchants, Syrian Christians, peasants, refugees, and mercenaries. There are maybe 20,000 people inside, but only a few thousand trained soldiers. On April 4th, the Mamluk army surrounds the city. The siege begins. The Mamluks roll forward massive trebuchets, some named after terrifying creatures like the victorious and the furious camel. They bombard Acre day and night. Huge stones smash into towers, break rooftops, and send debris flying through marketplaces. Archers unleash constant volleys. Miners dig under the walls to collapse them from below. Drums beat across the battlefield. Inside the city, the defenders rush from point to point repairing damage. Templars hold the eastern towers, Hospitallers guard the sea wall, and Italian militias man the gates. Civilians hide in churches and warehouses. Dust hangs in the air. After weeks of non-stop bombardment, the first major breach opens. Mamluk infantry surge forward. Street fighting erupts. The Crusaders form shield lines to block alleys. Arrows fly from windows and rooftops. For a moment, the defenders push the Mamluks back. But Khalil orders wave after wave. The pressure grows unbearable. The walls collapse further. Mamluk troops pour into the city. Fighting rages in the marketplaces near the docks and around the Templar quarter. Every house becomes a fortress. Every doorway becomes a shield. The Crusaders retreat toward the harbor, hopping to escape by ship. Italian galleys begin loading civilians. Crowds surge toward the docks. Panic spreads. Templars and Hospitallers form rearguard lines, buying time with their lives. By mid-May, only the heavily fortified Templar fortress remains. It sits on the western edge of Acre, facing the sea. The Mamluks surround it completely. Siege towers roll forward. Miners begin tunneling under the walls. Inside, Grand Master Guillaume de Beaujeu is wounded by an arrow. Legend says that when he staggers, his men tell him not to retreat, and he replies, "I am not fleeing. I am dead." He collapses shortly after. The defense continues without him. After several days, mining teams collapse part of the fortress wall. Mamluk soldiers charge through the breach. Fighting becomes hand-to-hand, room by room. Women and children shelter behind makeshift barricades. Templar knights die one after another defending staircases, courtyards, and balconies. The last defenders withdraw into the tower closest to the sea. Mamluk troops dig underneath it, packing the tunnels with wooden beams and flammable materials. They ignite the supports. The ground shakes. The final tower of the Knights Templar collapses into the sea, killing attackers and defenders together. Acre is gone. With its fall, the Crusader States come to an end. There are no more major holdings on the mainland. The survivors flee to Cyprus. Castles like Atlit and Tardis are abandoned. The era of Crusader rule, almost 200 years long, disappears in a matter of days. The last Christian stronghold in the Holy Land has been destroyed. The cross has finally fallen. When Acre fell in 1291, the Crusader states disappeared from the map, but their impact did not. Nearly 2 centuries of fighting had reshaped both the Middle East and Europe in ways neither side expected. In the Middle East, the Crusades forced rival Muslim dynasties to cooperate against a common enemy. Leaders like Zengi, Nur-ad-Din, and Saladin used the call to jihad to unite regions that had long been divided. By the end of the 13th century, Islamic unity was stronger than it had been in centuries, centered around the Mamluk sultans of Egypt and Syria. The lands once contested by Crusaders now formed the core of a powerful empire that would last into the 1500s. In Europe, the Crusades left a different legacy. Soldiers, merchants, and pilgrims who traveled to the Holy Land returned with new knowledge, medicine, mathematics, spices, navigation tools, and agricultural techniques. Italian cities like Venice and Genoa built their fortunes on the trade routes opened during the Crusader era. The flow of goods and ideas across the Mediterranean helped pull Europe out of isolation and into a wider, more connected world. The architecture of the Crusades also endured. Massive fortresses like Crac des Chevaliers and Belvoir became models for later medieval castles across Europe. Their designs, thick walls, angled towers, layered defenses, influenced fortification for centuries. Even today, some of these castles remain among the best preserved military structures of the medieval world. The military orders formed during the Crusades did not disappear either. The Hospitallers, originally founded to care for pilgrims, survived long after Acre. They moved to Cyprus, then Rhodes, then Malta, evolving into the Knights of Malta, an organization that still exists today. The Teutonic Knights shifted north, fighting in the Baltic and shaping the history of Poland and Prussia. The Crusades ended, but the institutions they created continued across continents. The memory of the Crusader era casts a long shadow. In Europe, the Crusades became symbols of religious struggle, chivalry, and medieval adventure. In the Middle East, they became reminders of invasion, resistance, and survival. These memories influenced politics, identity, and nationalism well into the modern age. In some regions, the word Crusader is still tied to painful history. Yet beyond the myths and legends, the reality is simpler. For 192 years, thousands of Europeans lived, traded, fought, and died in a land far from home, while the peoples of the Middle East defended their homelands with the same determination. The Crusader states were not permanent empires or stable kingdoms. They were fragile footholds, held together by fortresses, alliances, and constant war. From the capture of Jerusalem to the fall of Acre, the Crusader states stood for 192 years, a fragile kingdom held by the sword.